Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Card Talk, a podcast where we spend a little bit of time talking about cards from Lord of the Rings card game. I'm your host, Dave Walsh.
And I'm Grant Thompson, just along for the ride.
And I'm Ted Bannock, and I love talking about cards, which we'll be doing this episode, so I'm excited because it's going to be a twofer.
That's a twofer. And, you know, Ted, from what I understand, and it's so good to have you around, we were recording a block of shows without you, and now you're back, so it's always good to have you around. But I know that there's one thing that Ted loves talking about more than talking about cards, and that
it's talking about is our patrons.
And so in this, our month of couples, our couples February, we want to make sure that we thank all the patrons that help make this show possible. And so it's like a digital couple. There's Card Talk on one end and patrons on the other. So if you're interested in becoming a patron and supporting our show, feel free to visit patreon.com/cardtalk2018 and you can become part of this list. Daniel, David, Joseph, Kyle, Lewis, Mike, Dominic, Phil, who gave us the tagline at the end of the show about 10 rings. So Phil, thank you so much for being an awesome patron. Rob, Robert, the second Robert, and Sean. So thank you to all our patrons for being awesome. And so we're doing Couples February this month, and so we wanted to make sure that we highlighted maybe a couple of cards that were that play together, maybe intentionally or even unintentionally. So Grant, what cards are we going to be talking about today?
Well, the first one we're going to be talking about is Gimli from the Sands of Arad, the 11 cost, 2 willpower, 2 attack, 2 defense, 5 hit point, dwarf noble warrior with sentinel, and has response. After Gimli is declared as a defender, spend 1 resource from his pool to ready another hero. If that hero is Legolas, he gets +1 attack until the end of the phase, limit once per phase.
Okay. And in the spirit of Couples February, his coupling partner is, of course, Legolas, who was released alongside with him, his spirit version. He's got 9 threat, 1 willpower, 3 attack, 1 defense, 4 hit points, is traded Sylvan, Noble, and Scout. He possesses the ranged keyword and a response, which reads, after Legolas commits to a quest, discard a card from your hand to ready another hero. If that hero is Gimli, he gets +1 willpower until the end of the phase, limit once per phase.
Okay, boys, what do you have to say about these cards? Ted, I'll let you start. You said you've used Gimli, maybe not Legolas, but what do you think here?
You know, yeah, so, right, Couples February are cards that we look at are both couples outside of the game, in the story, people together on the table, in the books, whatever, you know. And it's funny because this pairing of cards is clearly like they're named on each other's cards, right? They're like that's unique to this pairing of cards.
Right.
Nothing else comes to mind that a hero, except for maybe
I think the
one of our other episodes, actually, Arwen and Aragorn, right? Aragorn is named on Arwen's card.
Right, and I think that the Rivendell bow names, Elladan and Elrohir.
Okay, all right.
And I think the Rivendell bow names Aragorn, but not.
Okay, so there's not many.
There's not many out there that happen to work, right?
So Leadership Gimli is, I really like him. You know, having Sentinel built in with the 5 hit points and 2 defense, and then his ability directly triggers off the Sentinel too. After you declare him as a defender, spend a resource to ready another hero, and you know, readying a hero for 1 resource, having that built in to a hero's ability is tremendously useful. It gives the bonus to Legolas, which is fantastic, but it has this flexibility of being any hero that you may need depending on the round. And when you're playing solo to 4 players, you're going to have more targets with the player count as it grows. So he gets a lot of value, I think, in multiplayer because he can Sentinel defend kind of anywhere in the round sequence and then trigger his ability to ready someone else that needs to be readied.
Well, and that's what I was going to say, is that I think that, solo using Gimli here as a hero really isn't...
here
special.
Comes David with,
special, right?
Your card's not so great in solo play.
Right. Well, I mean, that's how I play the game. I mean, he's good. I love that he's got, his stat line, and, Gimli has always been good. I like that he's in leadership, because leadership has a lot of neat little toys to put on him. For some reason, I always want to put Cram on a leadership hero. A leadership dwarf, because and that fits right in here to help out. But solo, you just don't get as many defenses with Gimli when you're doing this. Now, to switch the conversation to Legolas and Gimli together, and Legolas is neat because he's ranged, which Legolas, almost all the copies I think of Legolas are ranged. But the fact that he can commit, and then you can bonus, give the bonus to Gimli and have him quest for 3 and ready him for just discarding a card. I think that Legolas is the better include in a solo deck. Although I don't like that you're forcing him to commit to the quest, and then you lose all the things that he's really good at. So you need that readying that goes on, in the spirit sphere, the unexpected courages and things like that. So, that's the problem with this couple.
Well, it's so what's the end result here, right? So you quest with both of them.
You always quest with both. At least in solo, you quest with both,
right?
And then you discard a card to ready Gimli. Right. And so you haven't paid anything, right? And so now you have Gimli ready and has committed for 3. So you have 4 committed to the quest, right? And then if you don't have Gimli in your deck, you can't ready Legolas. So as a hero. So then when you use Gimli to defend, which you may not want to use him to defend, then you use him to defend, and then you ready Legolas, and Legolas now is attacking for 4, which is crazy good, but you have to pay the 1. And that's where, at the end of the round, you may not have the 1 to pay.
I think that's where Dwarven Shield comes into play. It increases Gimli's defense by 1, but also when he takes damage, you get added resource to his resource pool.
Well, leadership does have ways to gain
resources.
I'm not saying that there isn't.
There's plenty of resource acceleration out there.
Right.
There's many ways. Stuart Gondor being the number 1. Hero Theodred, I think works actually really well as a trouble to these two.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because Gimli has to be questing, and then Theodred gives a resource when he also quests. So you throw that on Gimli to help pay for his ability to ready Legolas.
You've also got Necklace of Girion.
True. That increases his willpower and gives him extra resources. So that's a tremendously good card.
Put Necklace of Girion on Gimli. That puts him up to a base questing of 4. Then add Legolas's ability. That's questing for 5.
Yeah, it's I think that the problem that I've always had with this deck, and this is where I throw it over to you guys as more of expert deck builders in a lot of different ways. I'm mainly building my deck solo. I don't play on Octagon because my stupid computer that I have doesn't allow me to use Octagon. I have a lot of limitations. So I'm really just building deck for solo. So I think the problem that I have is that there's a lot of cards to get this this combo, this couple up and running really well. But it's about drawing into those cards. Yeah, you can draw the Dwarven Shield and you can really help Gimli, but then you also have to draw the Necklace of Girion, or and you have to be able to pay for it. Like, it just is really slow to get up and running with it. But there is one thing that has come out recently that I think has helped this deck, and that's the Three Hunters. Shockingly enough, the three Hunters contract, which you can put the Mirkwood Long Knives onto Legolas, which is killer for this because it's in sphere and it gives you +1 attack and +1 questing or willpower. Like, I mean, so like, you can now build a deck where you can get all these cards out and you don't have any allies to kind of get in your way, and you can put a ton of these cards on here. So that until the Three Hunters contract, the Three Hunters came out, I feel like this was a subpar sort of couple pairing. I don't know. I just said a lot, but Ted, I know that you have something to say.
Yeah, I think. I think what you're getting at is paying a resource for Gimli and then a card for Legolas. You're saying just is costly, right? Like, it just like. Because then you're not using the resources to put allies on the table or equipment.
In a non-contract build, you're committing cards to Legolas, which discarding cards you can work around because there's a lot of cards that you can play out of your discard in Spirit. There's Elven Light and Glorfindel.
Right. Like, Elven Light's the number one, right?
The one in the best
card that you can discard and pull back to your hand.
So that's not as much of a limitation as the paying one around to ready Gimli, I feel, because leadership is, you're always starving yourself with resources. I feel, even though there's lots of resource acceleration, I don't know. I feel like I'm always running out of leadership resources.
Yeah, I think it can be quite, getting hero economy, action economy under heroes is very good, especially as you slowly build them by boosting their stats, and then them having multiplayer efficiency by being both ranged and sentinel. Again, not a solo thing, except for maybe certain cards you might want to use. Play on.
There are certain encounter cards that like can only be attacked with ranged. Like there are certain things like, but that's few and far between.
Right. There are cards for sentinel characters or things like that. But
defense.
Desperate Defense. It's a perfect example. Yeah, that's a spirit spirit event that targets a sentinel character. Yeah, exactly.
What was the card again?
Desperate
Defense. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so that's probably. I don't mind having to pay the resources to get these two going. Or the card and the resource, because I think it can be pretty powerful. And definitely when the Three Hunters contract comes out, that will be very efficient, because just to remind everyone what that one does is it essentially lets you, if I recall, you guys can correct me, you get you can equip one extra restricted item, and each item you have equipped gives you one extra willpower, is sort of the base of it.
Right. So
for not having any allies in your deck at all.
Right. So the restriction is you can't have any allies in your deck. And then you flip it over to side B, and then you get an extra slot. But you can only trigger it, and then you also get to reduce the first restricted attachment by 1 that you play on each hero, which is huge.
Tremendous.
It's crazy good, but then you only get it if you actually have to have at least 2 restricted, I think, on each one.
Yeah.
What is it, Grant? Look up. There's a restriction on it that it only flips until after you have a certain number of cards on it.
I think you need 2 items per hero, 2 restricted attachments per hero, but we'll have Grant check. I can say, I have. I built the deck with these 2, but I let someone else play it, and I gave it to someone who doesn't play very often, which maybe was the mistake with it. Because if you like a deck that has lots of triggers, You're going to be playing items. I remember, at least in my deck, that had a lot of triggers. Like Grant mentioned, the Dwarven Shield, which is you have to do the trigger on the Dwarven Shield to gain the resource after you take damage. So it's like you have to defend, trigger Gimli, take damage, like trigger the shield, and like trigger Legolas. Like you're constantly doing all of these abilities.
It becomes
So
kind of a complex deck to play.
it can, like, some people I think will see that as a chore because you're like, okay, I have these, 4 attachments and I have my 3 heroes and then I have these allies and I need to do all the triggers in like the most efficient order,
Right.
to really get it to work. Or some people will consider that very fun where you're like, okay, it's like a puzzle.
That's me.
And
I
have to, like,
love trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And
It's a new Gandalf deck.
I so often put the pieces of the puzzle together incorrectly. So, what were you saying? What were you saying, Grant?
I said it's a new Gandalf deck.
Yeah, except you have like 3 heroes that you want to put on toys on instead of just 2, or instead of just 1.
Fourth for 3 Hunters contract is your deck cannot include ally cards. Each of your heroes can have 1 additional restricted attachment. Reduce the first restricted attachment you play on each of your heroes.
Oh, that's right.
By 1.
That's why that.
If each of your heroes has at least 2 restricted attachments, flip this card over.
And that's hard to get, believe it or not. Like, I've played the 3 Hunters. That's hard to get 4, 5, 6 restricted attachments out and on there. I mean, you can do it, but to get them all in the right spot, because you don't want to put Dwarven Shield on the wrong hero. You don't want to put Mirkwood along. Like it's tough to.
Yeah,
it's tough to, like, do that.
It depends.
When you flip it, each of your heroes can have 1 additional restricted attachment and gets +1 for each restricted attachment on it. Action, exhaust the card to heal 1 damage from each of your heroes. So it's a very good, important contract.
Yeah, I think that contract will be the strongest build for these 2 heroes, right? Because you're getting stat boosting out of their abilities, and then you're getting stat boosting out of the contract even further.
I mean, has anybody thought about running them in the same deck, but running them in 2 separate decks?
Also quite possible,
That way,
having a dwarf swarm and then a Sylvan build opposite it.
Quite possibly, or just see running what makes them run good. So, for example, you could have Gimli and say a decent attacker with a decent quester. So you're getting an all-round build and having some resource generation built up on Gimli, so that way when he comes to defend, Legolas has the range, can then be ranged to snipe. Whereas with Legolas, you might want to pair with Arwen and say Kiadan or Eristor to get the card draw. So you've constantly got cards to discard.
Yeah, I mean, and then let me ask, where does the 3 Hunters contract go? If you're playing this, does it go with the Gimli deck or does it go with the Legolas deck?
It doesn't have to be either or.
Right.
Because bearing in mind, once you've separated them, you can account for, say, the card draw aspect with, say, the Legolas deck by having a low hero combined with it, so you're constantly drawing. With the Gimli deck, you could have resource acceleration with Theodred and with Leadership Denethor.
Mm-hmm. And there's no limitation on the card that says that they have to be in the same deck.
No, there's not. It's just if you choose to ready Legolas, it's not worded that they have to be
right.
The same player.
I think that's a great workaround, because here's my summary for what I was saying is that I think that playing these 2 heroes in a deck is hard, or not the best when you're playing them alone solo play. I think it's very hard to get this couple up and going. And so, but I think that the 3 Hunters contract makes this particular deck that way much better.
Certainly.
I think that that's really what I mean. The 300's contract deck makes other decks really good, but I think it makes specifically this deck that much better because of the heavy lifting that your heroes are going to be doing and how they trigger off of each other.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I definitely agree. I think they can still make a pretty good regular deck. Legolas is pretty, his stat line is pretty efficient. Like he's an attacker, right? So like he's 9 threat, you get 3 attack, whether you're using it for ranged or not. Legolas.
And let me interrupt you just really quickly there. I think also that 4 hit points is very good. Like there's a mild difference between a hero with 3 hit points and a hero with 4 hit points. I think that 3 to 4 is huge. So okay, keep going.
I agree with that as well. Gimli, on the other hand, he has kind of the weakness, I think, of being a sentinel defender and only having 2 defense. It's nice that he has that 5 hit point pool. And that's my only complaint about him is when you do start the game, he's not going to be as strong as a defender as like to compare everyone to the white tower of defenders, Baragon.
Baragon, right? Well, but he will be 3 with 3 defense with this guy.
The Baragon of perfection when it comes to defending.
Right. I don't know.
But there's been some recent cards that have come out, like Ancestral Armor is fantastic for Gimli. It's pricey at 4. There's ways to reduce that, or resource acceleration, but then to give him a +2 defense and I think is it +4 hit points as well.
+2.
+2 hit points.
Oh no, it's
+2 and +2.
It's +2 and +2. Okay, I had 4. I did the math.
It's a total
somewhere.
of 4, yeah.
It's a total of 4.
Right.
That makes him tremendous. I put Ancestral Armor on him, and then he's 4 and 7. And then you're like, I can do this all day, kids. Like, don't toss the dwarf.
Add the Halberg Meal onto that, and he's set up for the entire game, basically.
Oh, yeah, Halbrock of Mail, also fantastic. That only cost 1. And that gives him, since he's Sentinel, +1 hit point and the +1 defense.
Yep.
For 1, and that makes him right away like, okay, now he's got a nice safety blanket of 3 defense and 6 hit points.
Yep.
So the question is, and Grant, I'll ask you first. So assuming again we're running this as a solo build, you're not splitting the heroes up, and you're using Spirit Legolas and Leadership Gimli. What's the third hero spot? And Ted did manage to say Theodred right off the bat, but Grant,
I have others.
Who are
I want to hear Grant's. Grant, who completes the trouble?
The trouble.
Anybody, in my opinion, either Theodred or anybody from the Law Sphere to give you access to card draw. I mean, yes, you've got access with Elven Light, and that's great for recurring card draw, but you need to get that Elven Light off the bat. So I'd say something like maybe Haldan or even Smeagol for that low cost access to law.
Okay.
I mean, if you're running a 4 for 3 hunters, Smeagol can't have attachments, so therefore
yeah, that's a non-bow, right? You can't
That's
get the second.
non-bow.
You can't get the 2 attachments.
It'll never flip.
Right.
It could, because
you can't. No, there's no way it can flip because he has to.
The fact that you've got 2 heroes that can have attachments, and Smeagol says cannot have attachments. I therefore vote that it would still flip with you running Smeagol.
No, because what does the qualification say of the card?
It just states that the heroes have to have 2 restricted attachments.
Does it say all the heroes have to have? Does it say 3 heroes have to have restricted attachments?
Yeah, I feel like by the wording of the card, every single one.
I will say that
it.
if Smeagol flips to Gollum,
no, that's a different story.
then your heroes all have attachments, and then it flips back, and there's no case like the Fellowship contract where it flips back and forth. This one, once it flips, it flips, so you can actually do it. I guess now that I'm thinking about it, so maybe Grant is. I'm thinking that Grant's silly, but is that what you were thinking, Grant? Did I just say what you were thinking? Okay. Right. So, but what's the wording on 4th of 3 hunters?
Just that each of your heroes can have one restricted attachment. Reduce the each of
on
your
side A, what does it say?
if each of your heroes has at least 2 restricted
Each.
attachments.
There it is. Each.
But even if Smeagol flips over a Gollum, that cancels that bit out because the other 2 heroes have.
Right. As soon as he flips, then it's good.
Yeah.
Plus the
That'd be wonky, but that'd be really fun just to try. Just to see. You have to wait for like Stinker to come out, but that'd be funny if you get it to trigger when that happens.
I know. Wouldn't that be crazy? But in solo play, that's a pain in the neck because you have to bottom 2 right when you want Stinker to come out. Like it never happened, right? What else would you pair with it, Grant? I'm sorry, we're getting all sidetracked into how we're going to get the 4th to 3 Hunters contract to work.
Like I say, Haldan or Kiadan for that extra card draw.
What's Círdan's threat? Like 84 or something like that?
As old as his age.
Oh, geez, the 6,400. Isn't he one of the light enlightened ones? One of the Moraquendi who has seen the light of Valinor. I made it my goal for 2020. My New Year's resolution to know a lot, to become more learned in the lore of the game. So that's why I'm dropping big words like Moraquendi.
He's just trying to put me out of a job.
Yeah, right. And then it can just be me running the podcast all by myself. Okay, Ted, same question to you. Who are you going to pair this guy with? Okay, Gandalf, I get it. Okay, next.
Yep, Gandalf done. Next question.
Right.
Gandalf, well, certainly Gandalf would fit. I think there's better pairs. I think a really great third is Sam Gamgee because, you're looking at... He's a low threat hero with high willpower. So first turn, if you play no allies, you're questing for 7, which is pretty good. And then this is contingent upon the enemies that come out. But if their threat, if an enemy comes out and your threat is higher, and you can trigger Sam's ability, you will have all 3 of your heroes ready to attack. Gimli defends, and then you have Legolas with 4 and Sam with 2. If his ability triggers.
Right.
And then you can handle an enemy turn 1 while you quested for 7. So I think that's pretty good. Theodred,
probably get some of that Hobbit flavor in there with engaging enemies higher than your engagement cost and stuff, right?
Right.
So
and since you're also playing Spirit, so you have ways to continually reduce your threat to help trigger Sam's ability, including the card that came out in their pack, Well Warned.
Right.
Which is you need a noble and a scout, both unique, which Gimli and Legolas are. And that's a 0 cost event that lets you reduce your threat by an enemy's threat value once you engage it.
Right.
Another neat thing about Well Warned when I recently read it is it's you target a player that engaged an enemy. So if you are doing multiplayer, which I know David is like the death of you.
I'm in multiplayer. I'm in.
If we're playing a game and you engage someone, I can Well Warned you, and I can lower your threat.
Because it targets a player and not your area.
So I think there's a lot of synergy there. And then, of course, the synergy with leadership. Koragorn, he can also pull double duty at the cost of a resource. And he's also got high attack value.
And that also gives you easier access to Steward of Gondor.
Yeah,
you've got 2 leadership resources.
If you're going to play your deck with Steward, I really like starting with 2 leadership heroes, just in case you get it in your opening hand, or you mulligan it into your opening hand. You can just play it first turn to really get going.
And so, not that you guys asked, but I think that one of the best heroes to play this with is Leadership Denethor, because as you're trying to get everything up and running, that extra 2 resources at the beginning help with playing. Especially if you're playing with the contract, I think that it really helps getting the contract up and running because now you have more resources to pay for the restricted attachments, and then secondly, you're also able to trigger Gimli's ability. Like those 2 extra resources at the very beginning are just really.
Unfortunately,
really resourcey.
Unfortunately, without the Gondor trait, Denethor can't pass resources to Gimli.
Yeah, but at least you can save the one on Gimli and use it and use
Yeah,
his
he
up.
can.
Like that's being in the same sphere. I think that's
Yeah, that could work.
Anyone else, David?
Oh, you're asking. No, I think we hit some of the main guys. I think that you want to at least in my experience. Like I said, I think that this pair isn't necessarily good when you're playing solo all by yourself until the Fourth 300s came out. So
Yeah, that'll certainly make them much stronger. But I think in both solo and in then multiplayer, yeah, they're pretty viable. I do like Gimli's artwork a lot. uh, and Gimli or Legolas' artwork too. Just to sidetrack, I like his quote at the bottom too, where he says, "I go to find the sun." And I imagine in this picture of Spirit Legolas, where he's like walking in the snow, that he's like, walking like on top of the snow.
I was going to
I
say
think
he
that's
doesn't walk in the snow.
yeah, he's doing his like elf stuff, and they gave this version of Legolas the scout trait instead of the warrior trait, like his tactics has.
Now, just out of curiosity, do you think Gimli's artworks having him set there at Helm's Deep?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I believe that is a setting.
But his quote is from the Fellowship of the Ring.
Oh, well, yeah, but his quote too is also, I think, might be my favorite in the entire like saga.
Really?
That's on there, and I don't actually remember. I'm trying to remember who actually says it in the books. I don't remember. I don't think it. I don't remember if it actually is him.
No, it would have had Gimli if it was actually him that said it.
Yeah.
Just give us a minute and I will tell you.
Ted's looking it up too. It's erased. Dum, dum,
Oh.
dum, dum, dum,
No, it is Gimli.
Yeah, maybe. But it was during the Council of Elrond.
I was going to say that's a Council of Elrond quote. It's got to be.
Yeah.
Faithless is he that says farewell when the road darkens.
Yeah.
But usually they have who says it. That's what threw us off. Because usually as either Gandalf, the Fellowship of the Ring, Gimli, the Fellowship of the Ring, etc.
Well,
But,
I don't know.
Probably ran out of space.
Right. At the very least, at least they're putting in the core set. Sometimes the picture wouldn't even line up. Like wouldn't even be from the person who said the thing.
Yeah. See, I forgot that was a Gimli quote, but like like the words at least strike me in an enjoyable fashion.
That's very good. Now, I will say that I think we're just about ready to wrap this up. I think we've all said kind of what we wanted to say, but I will go around the table one more time and ask if there's anything at the end here that you want, because we're not going to ring the couple
Aren't
as
we,
a group.
David?
No, we're not going to ring, right?
Aren't we?
No.
No, we've got an arbitrary but less scientific.
Right. Right. We have an arbitrary and less scientific way of doing this, right? So, Ted, go ahead and last gasps about the couple, Spirit Legolas and Leadership Gimli. What do you think?
It certainly hits a thematic home run, because the initial ones that came out in the core set, they're both in sphere. The other versions are tactics, so they can naturally go into a deck by being two strong attackers. But these two were designed to have a synergistic combo together, which, like I said, gives you the thematic feel goods. And playing around with the triggers, it's fun if you build a deck that has a couple of attachments and other heroes. That can be really a fun mechanic to play, and I don't think it's on the weak side either. I think it's it's, are there better choices for defenders? Yes. Are there stronger attackers? That have attack, either a stronger attack or something to do with enemies, of course. But it's not quite as fun.
Grant, what's your What's your take on these two?
I like the bromance.
That's the word I was looking for. Yes, thank you, Grant.
You're welcome. They work well together. I believe they work better in their own decks. But in a solo deck, I have had some mild success with using. And I say mild because it all depends on if I get the right cards at the right time. But it's always fun to try and get this sort of deck to work. I was excited when the Sands of Harad came out and I got to actually play with both of these. And I like the fact that even without them being on the table with each other, they still benefit other heroes. So I actually like the pairing.
David, question before
Sure.
you give your final thoughts.
Okay, go ahead.
This is for this podcast. This is for this episode and all future episodes.
Okay.
What is your measure? But it seems to like really apply here, right? Because we usually talk about the value of cards, both in solo, 2-player, and multiplayer. Do you have a scientific method that is not arbitrary in which you measure this? Like, so for example, is there a quest? Like, is there a quest where if you build a solo deck and you play the quest and you beat it, you're like, okay, this deck is viable, right? Because if you try to take even the best solo deck might struggle against the hardest quests in the game because some quests are just not, like they don't play well for solo. So do you have a measure?
Sure. So thank you for the question. I think that this is the first time anybody's ever asked me a question about this. I mean, that has nothing to do with the cards.
David, would you like to talk about cards?
No, I'll just moderate. But in essence, I think your question comes down to play testing, right? So I think that the kind of the standard that I use to try something out to see if it works is usually a quest like Escape from Umbar from the Sands of Harad.
Okay.
I do like Journey down the Anduin from the core set, and I think that a lot of the scenarios in the Khazad-dûm cycle are good to test to see if your deck is working well. And you can't just play them once. The thing that I get when I'm playing alone is if I'm playing the Red Horn Gate, I don't know, that's probably not the best campaign. Let's Escape from Umbar, okay? If we're playing Escape from Umbar or that, and I play it once and I lose horrifically, that to me that doesn't say that my deck is done. What I do is I play it again and see how long my deck can last.
Well, because that's how science works, right?
Right. Test again, right?
No.
Test and test again to see if it works.
Our results are repeatable, right?
Yeah.
So
and then you tweak it, and then you keep going. And so, just because a deck doesn't work once against something doesn't mean that it's a bad deck. I can get a sense if I'm playing Umbar or Journey Down the Anduin, and my deck can get going, then I feel like it's good. Like there's something in my head when I'm building a deck, like I need to get that engine going. So for this deck, I need to make sure that I can ready both heroes at the same time, and I'm also triggering enough willpower to be able to successfully quest. Like that's my thing. I'm assuming that I'm going to be able to defend an attack with this hero lineup. Okay, so it's just a matter of me picking cards that can do that sort of stuff. Does that make sense?
yes, thank you for answering the question, because then I'm wondering, well, if I can build you a solo deck, if I can create a deck list that accomplishes that, like will that maybe change your mind on some of the cards?
Yeah, sure. I'm always open to those sorts of things. but but my final thoughts, right? So I think that again, and I want to mention this, talking about the bromance between these guys, we skipped over one card that is probably maybe one of the best cards to include in this deck, right? Like unlikely friendship, like like for 0 cost you get to draw a card and get a resource in a hero's resource, but like. What? For no cost, you're drawing a card and getting a resource? That's crazy. I mean, so the cost really comes in. You have to play a Sylvan and a Dwarf. And so, I mean, it's obvious that this was meant for a hero, Gimli hero Legolas deck, but they just keep the traits there.
Right, because it's a leadership card.
Right.
Which we'll have that episode later, lengthy.
Right.
But that's because that's basically a free resource. As soon as you draw it, you go resource, and then you draw another card.
Right, and then you replace it. So it's like there's no reason to not go up. If you're a 50 card purist building your deck, you can go up to 53 cards with this card in your deck because it just replaces itself. So, but. Nonetheless, I think that this deck, again, I'm just to summarize what I've been saying the whole thing. I think this deck, if you're playing without the contract, is really kind of mediocre, if that, because you just can't get it up and running. But with the contract, I feel that the contract can really make this deck totally sing and totally make everything really hum along really nicely with it. So I am looking forward to really fine-tuning my 3 Hunters deck using the actual 3 Hunters, Gimli, Legolas, and Aragorn.
Okay, so thumbs up, thumbs to the side, or thumbs down, David?
This bromance, I'm going to give it a thumbs to the side. How about you, Ted?
I'm going to give it thumbs up.
Oh, you and your...
Legolas and Gimli, come on. You get Spirit, right? Which means you can just like play cards like Test Will and other really great things in Spirit.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, you can be wrong. Grant, what do you think? Thumbs up, thumbs to the side, or thumbs down?
I'm going to have to agree with David on this one. I like Legolas and Gimli, but they aren't... Until I can get a fully functioning working deck that's going to consistently win, or at least be half decent at doing what it needs to do, I'm putting thumbs to the side. I like the idea. I think it's genius, but it's just not viable at this precise moment.
Okay, so there you have it. Our next bromance that we have for Couples February. Enjoy the show, enjoy the month, and we'll see you next time on Card Talk. Have a great day. And if you're interested in finding this or any of our back episodes of Card Talk, feel free to search YouTube, where you can find our flagship video episodes with the username Card Talk 2018. Or you can search the RSS feed, cardtalk2018.libsyn.org, for our extended audio versions of our podcast. Or you can find us on Facebook at Card Talk 2018. And if you have any questions for Grant or myself, or for both of us, feel free to email us at cardtalk2018@gmail.com.